increasing circulation of ideas, people, capital, and technologies between China and the rest of the world on the one hand, and China and the Chinese diaspora on the other. So, as one of our longest running research projects, the Transnational China Project exemplifies, I believe, the best of what we hope to achieve here at the Baker Institute and at Rice University. We seek to conduct cutting-edge research, examining some of the most important and influential trends at work in the world today. Understanding how China has been opening up is evidently very important, not only to scholars and students, but also business leaders and policymakers. This subject could not be more timely given the focus on China as an emerging global power today. In order for us to understand how to persuade the Chinese people to work with us, to participate in international efforts to address global problems such as global warming, health, and education, we need to understand how they are being asked to join the world. A key part of how they are being asked to join the world is, of course, through advertising. And where they are being asked is important too. As cities all around China and the world are adding subway systems and new public spaces, policymakers need to better understand how the hundreds of millions of people passing through these spaces are being asked to view the world. Are advertisements asking the Chinese people and the people in global cities to do more than just buy fancy goods? Are the advertisements asking Chinese to think of themselves as local citizens, national citizens, or global citizens? This conference will help us understand the future of cooperation with China through understanding the influence of both subway culture and advertising culture. I look forward to hearing your presentations and discussions and learning more about this pioneering area of research. I would also like to thank the Henry Luce Foundation and other benefactors of the Transnational China Project for their support for this research. And finally, I'm delighted to announce that the Starr Foundation has recently endowed the position of the organizer of this conference, Dr. Steve Lewis. He is now the Baker Institute's C.V. Starr Transnational China Fellow. He has truly now become legitimate. This generous donation will enable us to continue the study of the distinctly transnational aspects of China's role in the global economy and global society for many years to come. So I hope to see all of you in our future conferences, workshops, and events. Look forward to your contributions, and thank you very much for being here with us today.
Welcome to the Transnational China Project's Fall 2010 Conference, Subway Culture and Advertising Culture. As one of the organizers, I'd like to say just a few words to try and introduce some of the work that I hope we can accomplish today. First, allow me to say a few words about the inspiration and origins of this conference. In 1998, Richard Smith, right here in the second row, Benjamin Lee, who's no longer with us at Rice, and I began the Transnational China Project to examine the influence of a growing middle class in China and the Chinese diaspora of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and other regions of the world. We were especially curious to see whether or not the Chinese middle class, as with its European counterparts had done before, were going to create a civil society in China, a public sphere that can stand apart from the Chinese state. So we began by examining the circulation across borders of literature, poetry, film, newspapers, and journals, the media which have traditionally led to the creation of new publics and the notions of a civil society. But after observing the proliferation of advertising in public spaces, and including the subway stations in Chinese cities, we began to wonder if these advertisements could themselves act as the media of a new form of collective identity formation. And so certainly millions of middle class and emerging middle class people see these every day, and of course they contain the images and the text suggesting that they join new groups, affiliations, affinities, collective identities. So because these ephemera that we were seeing were obviously influential and yet understudied, we approached the Henry Luce Foundation in 2001 for funds for a multi-year study of the media of consumer citizenship. We began with collecting images of every commercial and public service advertisement in the subways of Beijing and Shanghai, and then moved on to include Hong Kong, Taipei, Kaohsiung, and Singapore as these systems began to develop. In 2004, we even started adding in surveys, annual surveys, of advertisements from the Washington, D.C. subway system for comparative value. As we began to do these surveys, however, we noticed that there were significant differences in the subway systems themselves. Each city's subway system had its own civilized norms of civilized behavior, different riderships, people riding the subways, and even different slogans and messages that would appear in the commercial and public service ads. So more and more we began to see that the ads we were observing were not just the product of China's and Western and global advertising culture, but they were also the product of distinct local subway cultures as well. And so thus we have a conference about advertising culture at a university that has no media or communication studies program. And thus we also have a conference on subway culture in a city that has comparatively little public transportation and will probably never ever see a subway system as well. That said, this conference is building upon many workshops and presentations we've had over the years in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Melbourne, St. Louis, Cambridge, London, Taipei, and Houston over the years, in which we brought together some experts to try and untangle some of the theoretical and methodological concepts in trying to study the influence of these advertisements. And so today's conference will see us unveil the results of some of pioneering studies from this stage of our research. This is very much an ongoing research project, and also to introduce you to some works from the top scholars who are looking at different aspects of these from very different disciplinary perspectives. Li Anru, an anthropologist from City University of New York, will share her research on the cultural politics of the mass rapid transit system in Taipei and Kaohsiung. Li Hongmei, a communication studies scholar from Georgia State University, will discuss the culture and politics of China's rapidly growing outdoor advertising industry. Tani Barlow, our own director of the Chao Center for Asian Studies at Rice University, will share her research on the creation of the image of the modern girl in early 20th century Chinese advertising. We'll then break for lunch in the Commons, where you'll be able to see some of the ads collected by dozens of Rice students and other field researchers from more than 15 cities this year. And I'll talk more about this project during my own presentation at the very end of the conference. But during lunch, you'll be able to see some of the immense variety in commercial and public service ads from subway systems in global cities all around the world. After lunch, Megan Ferry, a comparative literature scholar from Union College, will discuss her research on the interaction of Chinese and Latin American media. Then Geneva Henry, who is director of the Center for Digital Scholarship here at Rice University's Fondren Library, will discuss how changes in software technology and archiving protocols have made possible new forms of collective sharing of images, documents, and other research materials by scholars living in different parts and living and working in different parts of the globe. Zoe Shen, from Director of International Operations at Horizon Survey Research in Beijing, which is China's largest private survey research company, will discuss the results of the March 2010 survey of commuters from 4 Chinese cities that we sponsored, in which we asked commuters to tell us what they feel and observe and see in the different subway systems as cultural spaces, but then also how they feel about the advertisements in them. And then finally, I'll share my own research on the similarities and differences in commercial and public service ads in Chinese and American cities, with an emphasis on what this might mean for new forms of international public diplomacy involving public service ads. So we hope that today will be an opportunity for all of us to learn more about these new areas of research and to learn from our experts. We're also hoping this will be very much an exchange of ideas. So it's a conference, but in some ways it's also a workshop. And we're hoping that the audience members, both here, and we've had replies by email that people all over the world, mainly a lot of the scholars that we've worked with in different regions and different universities, will also be tuning in via webcast. And so, but we very much hope that this will be an interactive one. And so we've set up presentations, but also left enough time for discussion and ideas, because we're very much looking for ideas on how to continue this forward with next steps of research. And so without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Li Anru from City University of New York. And her presentation is called Global as National, the Cultural Politics of the Mass Rapid Transit System, MRT, in Taiwan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm nervous. I changed the title of my presentation from the one on your program to this Global as National, the Cultural Politics of Mass Rapid Transit Systems in Taiwan. And today, actually, this is part of my larger book project, and I have been working on there are only 2 subway systems in Taiwan. One is in, oops, how do you do this? You just touch it?
No, sorry, pull up this one.
Oh.
There you go, insert hit that.
Okay. Oops. Okay, so today I actually will be talking about both Taipei City and Kaohsiung City. So I'm actually telling you a story of two cities and through their subway systems. Hey, so let me start with two stories. During the afternoon rush hour on November 18, 2000 in Taipei City, a young man needed to deliver the body of his recently deceased mother promptly from home to a hospital at the opposite end of the city where she had promised to donate her organs after her death. Knowing that the streets of Taipei would be jammed with cars, motorcycles, and buses, and his mother's, how fond his mother was of the city's subway system, the young man's body in a wheelchair covered her face and pushed the wheelchair onto an MRT. He told the curious passengers in the packed car that his mother was sick and they were on their way to see a doctor. Without raising a red flag, the young man arrived at the hospital fast enough for his mother's organs to be removed for donation. This story was reported on newspapers in the following few days. The tone of the newspapers' articles, as well as the responses of related Taipei City and county officials, focused on the legality of the young man's action. The Taipei County Fire Department immediately made the announcement that ambulances were only to respond to medical emergencies, but not to transport dead bodies. Then General Manager of Taipei Rapid Transit Corporation, a Taipei City government agency in charge of the daily operation of the subway system, assured the public that they would look closely into the surveillance tape of that particular day to verify the truthfulness of this story. If the young man indeed did what he was accused of doing, the TRTC, the company, would definitely condemn him for violating a well-disposed customs as endorsed in the regulations for mass rapid transit systems. It was not clear from the general manager's assertion, however, whether or not the company had the legal ground to charge the young man. Similarly, officials of the Taipei City Department of Transportation were not sure whether they had right to refuse anyone from using public transportation to transfer a dead body. Taipei City Councilwoman Huang Shanshan, her name, criticized the company's lack of vigilance. She urged that the TMRT, Taipei MRT employees, be more alert and observant to any abnormal behavior. Otherwise, what are we going to do if people begin to dump bodies on the subway because they didn't have money to have a decent funeral? She questioned. Never questioned in these commentaries or wavered by the general public who read or heard about the story, however, was the young man's face in the Taipei MRT as Taipei City's most speedy and reliable means of transportation. So you sort of begin to see the face and the liking of the metropolitan Taipei residents to their subway system. Now, the second story. A few months later, in 2001, not long after the groundbreaking ceremony of the Kaohsiung's MRT, a few months later, a story was widely circulated in Kaohsiung City. It recounted that an old man stood by Kaohsiung MRT construction site, looking over the fences with a solemn look on his face. People wonder why he bore such sadness. Is it because the construction site blocks the city's traffic? They asked. Old man answered, "Oh no, how can I grieve over such a wonderful event? I came to pay homage to the huge construction machines. It has been many years since I last saw them in our city." Quote. The reality that this story actually was fake was part of the Kaohsiung City government's campaign to muster a popular support for the Kaohsiung MRT does not make it less powerful. Although fictive, it effectively captured the deeply felt injustice among Kaohsiung City residents that they had long been treated as secondary citizens by Taiwan's central government, as opposed to Taipei City denizens who were always given a lion's share of resources. Kaohsiung has not seen much public investment since the 10 major construction projects in the early 1970s, which sort of helped Taiwan to further develop its industrial base. that the construction of the Kaohsiung MRT was launched more than 10 years after the grand opening of the Taipei MRT was only one more example of this inequality. Mr. Xu, a civil servant at the port of Kaohsiung, who told me about the story called MRT, an indicator of a city's modernity. He said that there was much talk about how the Kaohsiung MRT was an unnecessary wasteful pork barrel, the result of political calculation of then ruling Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, to entice voters in southern Taiwan. But he said, so what? Kaohsiung has always been ready for big tasks. We have a well-educated population, and we are highly motivated. What we need are opportunities and adequate resources. Now we finally got the recognition that this will be our best chance, end quote. Drawing on the sentiments expressed in the above stories, my presentation tells the stories of Jieyun, literally rapid transit, the mass rapid transit systems, as the subways are officially known in, well, these two cities. Okay? And this paper actually, I tried to give you an overview, overall framework of what my, what I try to do in my book. Okay? And essentially, I'm pulling together two sets of theories of problematics. On the one hand, it is the theories or questions of global city formation, okay? And on the other hand, it is local cultural identity production, or in this particular case, nation building of Taiwan. And what I try to show in the following presentation is, well, Taiwan's MRTs actually present a paradox for us to re-understanding sort of how these two sets of questions come together. Okay, and Taiwan, well, well, I will tell you in a minute. Okay, the recent development of Taipei and Kaohsiung conform to a trend that urban studies scholars have observed elsewhere in the globe. Okay, so that is the part of global city formation. Both cities strive to create themselves after standards of world-class cities, with the requisite features of parks, green space, modernized public transit systems, for example, subway, and blue-chip architecture, okay, Taipei 101, for example. A comparison and contrast between Taipei and Kaohsiung, however, brings forth a set of questions crucial to the understanding of the current process of global city formation. Fundamentally, even though many cities in today's world are inspired to become global cities, not all cities with this inspiration are equipped with or able to garner the resources necessary to carry out their ambition, right? So money, where the money is going to come from. And subways are very expensive. So that actually is my entry point. Particularly in the case of Taipei, if it is a capital, so everything was spent on Taipei, then how did Kaohsiung get the money to build a subway system? And so that brings us to the second set of questions. They have to frame a kind of discourse that is legitimate enough for Kaohsiung to get these vast resources, right? So in the case of Taiwan, the intercity competition between Taipei and Kaohsiung for urban development resources, especially in MRT, is imbued with the country's struggle for national and cultural identity. Specifically, while Taipei City obtained the central government's full financial support for the MRT construction more than 2 decades ago in 1988, Kaohsiung City government secured the vast funding to bankroll its urban renewal, including an MRT project, only recently in 2001, by fashioning a nationalist discourse. As opposed to Taipei, that was a Chinese city, however defined, ruled and inhabited by the Kuomintang KMT elites and other KMT-related personnel. The Kaohsiung Municipal Administration, at that time under a DPP mayor, Xie Changting, Frank Xie, effectively positioned Kaohsiung as an authentic Taiwanese city with hardworking, if somewhat rustic and unrefined. It's a blue-collar city, right? It is industrial city, hence blue-collar people who had sacrificed for Taiwan and were now entitled to have back their clean environment with natural beauty. The results of this urban renewal project in turn were presented as symbols of modernity and constituted the essence of Taiwanese identity. As such, global becomes national. And I may push it further to say the more global you are, the more Taiwanese you are. Okay, so the sort of the essence of Taiwanese identity becomes, it's non-essential. It is not well, kind of the left part of what theories usually called for. Yet one cannot help but find irony in Kaohsiung, a case of asserting nationalism, presumably one of the most localized processes, not by identifying with unique vernacular historical characteristics, but with the outside world, and by appropriating homogeneous universal global cultural symbols. The significance of Taiwan's MRTs thus lies on the paradox. They revealed that interfaces to theoretical considerations. The discussion of global city formation that emphasizes the homogenization of the world's cities on the one hand, and the issue of local cultural production that stresses the surging trend of showing indigenous differences and distinctiveness in response to precisely the aforementioned global homogenizing tendency on the other. It not only challenges the simple dichotomous understanding of both, but also highlights the danger of equating and privileging the local as a space of authenticity and community while associating the global with the abstract and universal. And so I'm going to show you how I come to this conclusion, and I'm also going to show you why Taiwan's nation building sort of goes this way. Hey. Oops. Taipei's MRT is the first subway system ever built in Taiwan. Presently, it is also, well, no longer, well, originally intended as a solution to Taipei's worsening traffic problems. The function of the MRT, as well as the Taipei residents' perception about it, has changed over time. Once plagued with scandals, lawsuits, and disasters, Taipei's MRT has become Taiwan's latest symbol of modernity. There was indeed a period of adjustment when Taipei residents learned that there were rules to follow while riding an MRT. For example, passengers were banned from eating, drinking, chewing gums or betel nuts, as well as littering trash in the subway. Those who violated the rules would be fined. Also, one is encouraged, so it's very clean. Also, one was encouraged to stand in line, you can see the line, while waiting for a train, and was urged to stand on the right-hand side of escalator and reserve the left-hand side for people in a hurry to pass. Okay. After the initial confusion and frustration, however, MRT passengers quickly discovered with delight how clean and efficient their subway system was and how easy and comfortable their trips around the city had become. And they begin to complain when the train is a minute or two late. And from New York, you can imagine that. The MRT also drew many visitors and tourists from other parts of Taiwan who came to Taipei not necessarily exclusively for riding the MRT, but certainly have the activity on the itineraries. Taipei city government has also been actively using, it doesn't move. Is it frozen? Yeah, it's frozen. Taipei city government has also been actively using the MRT to promote its cause as well as advertise activities sponsored by the city. Steve has collected a lot of that data, and he probably will show you this afternoon. Oh, okay, so the metropolitan metro is more than just transportation system. Furthermore, the Taipei MRT has become an alternative cultural center. Art and sculptures are installed in several MRT stations, and this is presumably a landmark of Taipei. Okay, and these are some of the images I want to show you, and you can see the colors actually represent different subway lines, so you can ride the subways to culture. Okay, and this is public art works installed in different stations, and I give you a few examples. And okay. It's frozen again. So I want to show you
it's frozen.
Again.
It's
yeah.
just a little slow. You just need
to be patient. I'm too quick.
There you go.
Okay. So I call this poster boy of Taipei City, and the image is really pleasant. But the work here is not by a Taiwanese artist. And so that sort of begins the part of, well, what is Taiwan about all of these? Okay. Okay. The overall change in Taipei was quickly noticed by Asia Week news magazine, an English magazine, which in 1999 voted Taipei the second most livable city in Asia and the fourth in 2000, and the magazine discontinued its ranking after 2000. The Taipei MRT was also ranked #1 among metros serving under 5 million people for 4 consecutive years, 2004 to 7, in terms of reliability, safety, and quality standards by this group, consortium of subways in the world. Okay. Now, on many occasions, when I presented findings from my MRT research and indicated that Taipei's MRT had become one of the latest symbols of modernity in Taiwan, and I love it dearly, you probably can see it, I really love the system. Time and again, I was asked the question of whether I was too positive about the impact and implication of the MRT, as well as to what extent the liking of Taipei residents showed toward the MRT was a result of the all-powerful process of globalization that propelled developing or late developed countries to live up to the standards set up by the Western developed world. Also frequently raised was the possibility that given the authoritarian nature of the Taiwanese state until recently, MRT passengers in Taipei were likely forced by their government into behaving in orderly manners. Entailed in these comments was the criticism of the current global economic system that tended to homogenizing local cultures and societies. Yet it seems to me that it also implies that without the coercion of the global economic forces and or the citizens' habitual compliance to the once repressive Taiwanese government, the Taiwanese would not act the way they did now on the subway. I often put forth these comments as questions to elicit a response from Taiwanese through my head conversation on Taipei subway. In the summer of 2005, I posed these questions to the spokesperson of the DPP's New York city office, who happened to be also pursuing a doctoral degree in urban studies in the United States, and was well versed in Western critical urban theories, who also happened to come from Kaohsiung. He gave me a lengthy answer and he said, I quote, "The MRT is indeed a symbol of modernity, but this is not simply because we Taiwanese desire or want to pursue a Western-style modernity. We certainly have our imagination about modernity. To behave in an orderly way on the subway, to keep the system clean, to stand in line. All of these are not about a middle-class ideology or aesthetics. Rather, it is because this is the first time in the Taiwanese history that we Taiwanese could really realize that we had known and for what we had longed for a long time in our daily lives. Under the KMT rule, Taiwanese people couldn't say anything about public policy. The state had been lagging behind the society. The state's imagination couldn't match of that of the Taiwanese society. Now, finally, the moment has come that we have the chance to do what we had always known, what we were capable of doing, and what we wanted to do. Of course, we will grasp this opportunity to prove ourselves to the world. So it's sort of echoes to the story I told you previously. However much this answer reflects his personal political view or job obligation as the Taiwan independence-leaning DPP spokesperson, the indignant sentiment expressed in his words is widely shared among the Taiwanese, particularly in the South. While the building of Taipei's MRT seemed to be a natural move for Taiwan to claim its current status in the global economy, doubt and ambivalence have been expressed by many Taiwanese elites and community activists based outside Taipei toward regarding Taipei as a representation of Taiwan. As such, the new global status of Taipei has not only reinforced the sense of unfairness in resource distribution, but also sharpened the contradiction found in the country's struggle for cultural and national identity. And it is, again, this political ideological backdrop that we can begin to contextualize the construction of Kaohsiung's MRT. Okay. I have a title. Kaohsiung MRT is everything but a transportation system, you sort of say. The Kaohsiung MRT is never simply a subway system. It is as much a cultural and political project as an economic project. Similar to Taipei's MRT, the making of the Kaohsiung MRT is a long and arduous process. The actual construction of the KMRT finally materialized, Okay. Oh, yeah. The reason I say that it is everything but the transportation system is because currently there are probably 1 million people on Taipei subway daily, and there are only 120,000 to 130,000 people on Kaohsiung subway. And this was a survey done last year, so you can see that, well, the majority of people in Kaohsiung still use personal transportation means and primarily motorcycle to travel. And very few people use public transportation. It doesn't help that there are only 2 lines. So Kaohsiung subway, in a way, is like Houston's light rail. It's very short and it doesn't serve much purpose. But that aside, what we are seeing here is that, well, another revealing. Am I offending anybody here? What is also revealing here is that 25% of Kaohsiung MRT passengers, actually came from out of town. So it is a subway system for leisure and weekends. It is a subway system for daily commuters. So you kind of see the nature is really off, right? And that was primarily the criticism that Kaohsiung really doesn't need to have a subway system because the people are using private vehicles and the streets are large and broad, and there's no traffic jam. And as a matter of fact, after the construction of Kaohsiung MRT, the company actually was required to build parking space so people could use the subway, but parking space is free. So as you can imagine, so where is the incentive to use the subway system? Okay? And so the deep skepticism actually has its root. Okay? And the actual construction of the KMRT materialized in the early 2000s. It looks so last century. After Chen Shui-bian won the presidential election running on a Taipei Center South base, as opposed to a China-friendly, Taipei-focused campaign. And when Kaohsiung city mayor Xie Changting was a fellow DPP member, the announcement of the KMRT construction came a time when Taipei's MRT was just completed and proven to be, well, very popular. The Kaohsiung MRT therefore served as a potential political symbol that indicated the determination of the DPP-led government to balance the perceived as well as real, actual South-North disparity. Okay, but there was a lot of skepticism. And when I did my interview in Kaohsiung, a lot of people sort of, well, Kaohsiung MRT is great. We should have a subway system, but I'm not going to use it. So the use of subway system and we want one are 2 different stories, right? These 2 are not together, and they want one for some other reasons. Hi, okay. So here I'm going to jump to sort of the story. So predicated on a nationalist discourse, the resources were given, and so a subway was built. And ironically, this was also a moment when the economy of Kaohsiung is facing major challenges due to Taiwan's recent economic structuring on the one hand, and where Taiwan basically is deindustrialized and the factories have gone to China, although some of them have come to Taiwan because of the laws changed. And the emergence of a global city as a main site of global economic competition on the other. The unemployment rate of Kaohsiung is one of the highest in the country simply because it has been one of the most industrialized regions in Taiwan. The Kaohsiung MRT as a major public works project was thus expected to create construction jobs to help reduce the unemployment rate, although in reality, many of the workers working on Kaohsiung MRT are foreign workers from other countries. More significantly, and here comes the part sort of about why it is global as opposed to local. More significantly, the Kaohsiung MRT was taken by both the Kaohsiung city government and the local community as a key to the economic revival of Kaohsiung city. And here we go into the series of culture-led urban revitalization, sort of we see from one city to another globally. Okay? And so right before the construction of MRT, the Kaohsiung city government has been implementing a series of urban renewal projects, including greening the land adjacent to the MRT, cleaning the river, Love River, cutting across the heart of the city, renovating the harbor area into a pedestrian-friendly waterfront, and using vacant port facilities as artist colonies. And I didn't make this up. This actually came from the website of Kaohsiung City. Okay. So culture-led urban regeneration is a very important strategy adopted by the Kaohsiung City. More directly related to the MRT, the Kaohsiung Rapid Transit Corporation commissioned several world-renowned architects and artists to design or incorporate their works into the structure of Kaohsiung MRT stations, and they are called spatial stations. Emerald Naminata, a work of 2 large sculpted glass walls by Canadian artist Les Holschat, is now installed at Kaohsiung International Airport Station. At the Formosa Boulevard Station, which Formosa incident was an important incident in Taiwan's recent history of democratization, the Dome of Light, an arched glass work that is installed in the ceiling of the Grand Concourse. It's designed by Italian artist Narcissus Quaglietta. It symbolizes light of cycle and pays homage to the Formosa incident, a historical event that documented Taiwan's pursuit of democracy. The architecture of the station, you kind of can see 4 of this, okay? This is the work of Japanese architect Shin Takamatsu. It shapes like 4 hands coming together to pray. Again, it sort of has the symbol, well, for particularly this station, okay? Floating forest at the Half-Cliff Mountain World Game Station, designed by American artists Ron Wood and Christian Carl Jensen, features windows with art glass panels with various transparencies at both the concourse level and the roof of the station. The architectural design, of the station is the vessel, and unfortunately, I didn't get the information of who designed it, and so I don't know whether it's Taiwanese or other national. Entitled "The Vessel," is literally shaped like a vessel. This architectural design, according to one of the earlier Director General of Kaohsiung MRT Bureau, takes into Kaohsiung's topography that is largely flat, with only a few low hills standing on the fringe of the city, like Half-Cliff Mountain. As the MRT station is built against the mountain, viewing from afar, the vessel evokes the sensation, and I quote his words, a sensation of a ship whose sails are fully charged, ready to cruise. It is an attempt to symbolize both the past history of Kaohsiung as an important harbor and the vision for Kaohsiung to remain an important and world-class port city. And last but not the least, flying at Central Park Station. Central Park Station is the work of British architect Richard Rogers. Through all of these efforts, that Kaohsiung City government is attempting to create a renewed civic identity, similar to what Taipei's MRT has accomplished for Taipei City, as well as to announce to the country and hopefully to the world that Kaohsiung is Taiwan's southern capital, a better alternative to Taipei. Okay, here is my conclusion. Yeah, so tell me, what is Taiwanese about all the things that we just see? One cannot help but find irony in the fact that while Kaohsiung secured both financial and symbolic capital by predicating itself as an authentic Taiwanese city, as well as the rightful representation of Taiwan, the city government drew its inspiration to build a better city from something European, Western, or globally recognizable. To tie this irony back to the question of global-local articulation I raised at the beginning of this presentation, the case of Taiwan upsets any simple dichotomous understanding of this issue. Moreover, I would propose that nation-building of Taiwan contributes to the theorizations of this issue in 2 ways. Okay. Now, almost there. First, given the cultural and historical proximity between the island of Taiwan and the mainland of China in the historical past, and the political claim of the PRC on Taiwan's sovereignty at present, global cultural symbols enable the Taiwanese to imagine a national identity that is not Chinese and that is distinctively distant from the historical and current China. In other words, a new strategic alliance between the between new strategic alliance between, where is it? This is a good line. Between the global and the national has emerged from the paradoxical situations of Taiwan, where globalization has provided new grounds upon which the nation can be reformulated. Furthermore, Furthermore, the case of Taiwan is significant to the discussion of nation building in a second way. If the first reason is to respond to the current situation between Taiwan and China, the second reason actually is responding to the domestic politics, which probably sort of precedes the first reason. In the process of forging a consensus on national identity, Taiwan faces not only external challenges, like I say, like the claim of the PRC, but also internal contentions derived from its heterogeneous citizen body. As a result, in their attempt to create a Taiwanese identity by trumpeting the Chinese-centered national cultural imagination championed by the recent, by KMT regime, Taiwanese nationalists might have been forced to recognize that different populations in Taiwan had different degrees of intimacy with that cultural imagination. This is similar to many post-colonial societies struggling to balance the desire to build a new or renewed social order, often based on an imagined, untainted pre-colonial past, and the political reality left behind by the departing colonial government. Therefore, to emphasize the universal global rather than a split divided past as the basis of national solidarity seems to be a sensible move under the circumstances and may present a new paradigm of nation building and a more sophisticated way to understand global city formation in the current world. Thank you. Questions?
We have time for maybe 6 or 7 minutes of questions
Okay.
or so.
Yes, please.
I really enjoyed your talk very much, and I think it's fascinating the way you're saying that the new identity that's being forged is not Chinese, that it's allowing the Taiwanese to construct a new national identity. But I'm not sure I see the differences between what the new subway system seemed to be attempting to bring the Taiwanese to the global culture, but I'm not sure how you see that it's creating a new national identity. Can you elaborate on that more?
There's no, I think the purpose of a subway system actually is multifold, right? It is certainly sort of align Taiwan, or at least Taipei and Kaohsiung, so they hope with other cities of a modern subway system. And that is certainly, you can say that is global citizenship. We see that. But I think what I'm arguing here is that, well, when we look at, well, it may be too simple just to say, okay, so what they do is trying to be emulate like other advanced cities, right? And what I try to find is sort of there are internal, sort of more local reasons for them to do the things they do. And so in this case, on top of this global citizenship, which is certainly there, the kind of global limelight they try to capture, but then there is also the answer to local, kind of a local political kind of situations, local cultural struggles for certain things that they want. And in this case, kind of embracing all these global symbols actually help them to evade a lot of difficulties and a lot of sort of predicaments that they are facing, and kind of is a way to kind of temporarily solve it. And so that's what I try to say. And if I may say this, I don't know, kind of later on we will hear things about China, subways in China. And if I can say this, for example, this aspect of using subway systems to try to wrestling with a particularly difficult national identity probably is not occurring, or it is not a question for Chinese, for example, because China doesn't need to face this sort of very kind of entangled issue, right? And that is what I'm arguing here. Yes?
I have a question. What do you think the Taiwanese government needs to do about its culture to motivate people to want to use the transportation system from a marketing and advertising point of view? How are they going to get more people to use the system? That's one question. The other question is, because I can't tell from your maps, is has both transit systems tie into the airport, like the comings and goings of the people that land from airplanes? Does both systems relate where when you get off an airplane or you're going to an airport, you can use this system? Because I can't tell from the map.
And high-speed rail, too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, I was thinking about this issue last night. Well, let me say this first. Well, you can do whatever required you to do to try to be a global city. And that is sort of a subjective part of yours, right? But there is also this objective part that actually is not depend on you. That is depend on, for example, global economic situation or a local or global geopolitical situation. And I think in this case, well, what we are seeing here is, what I'm actually saying is that the subway system is widely used in Taipei. It is certain, I mean, now the new, in Taipei, they are building an extension to the international airport just recently. Sort of, you kind of see it's actually lagging behind, however people like it, right? And so they are trying to do whatever they can. But I think Taipei, in terms of its global economic ordering, there are certain, like status that you can still imagine people from outside will have to come to Taipei, and Taipei people will have to fly out of Taipei to attend that. So I think in that sense, then whatever Taipei City tries to do and try to use public transportation system to help boost this efficiency, you kind of can see it will work. People will understand that, and it's needed. And whereas in Kaohsiung, one thing I forgot to say is that, well, there are 2 million. Well, basically, the subway system in Taipei extends from Taipei City and Taipei County, sort of metropolitan Taipei area. And there are 2 million difference in terms of population during day and night in the city, Taipei City. So you can see 2 million people have to go in and out in Taipei City. And many of them actually have to use public transportation to come in, right? And so there is a natural sort of a situation there. Whereas in Kaohsiung, there are 1.5 million during the day, well, at night, there are 1.5 during the day. So there are no people moving in and out. And that speaks to the very kind of economic, kind of a traditional past economic nature of Kaohsiung, which is industrial-based. It's state corporations. So people live in the dormitories provided by the companies. They ride the company buses to go to work. So there's no, I mean, basically they are there. It's still, they don't need to move. And right now, Kaohsiung is facing extremely difficulty in terms of economy, and you still see no moving. And so I think that is external forces. No matter how much you do, there is certain limitation that you have to take into account. And in the case of Kaohsiung, they've done a lot, try to entice people media-wise, kind of promotion activities, try to push people to use the transportation system. But the matter is, I think it's like in Houston, and public transportation system is competing with private transportation system in terms of private transportation system actually moves you from door to door. So any public transportation system is, I mean, if it's going to work, it has to compete with this door-to-door convenience. And so in the Kaohsiung case, right now, there are only 2 lines, so it's unfair to say, well, it's not working. But the way that the bus system is not set up to encourage people to transfer, kind of that is not going to make it work. So there are a lot of real things to do, infrastructure building to do before any media kind of campaign to work. So I guess, yes.
I will just add into this question. In a sense, whether the MIT system in 2 cities are really affordable to daily use for all communicators, because you mentioned the limitation of the coverage of the subway system, especially in the Kaohsiung system.
Right.
So you think it's mainly because of it's not affordable way, or maybe it's about the coverage limitation or any other?
Right, that actually is a good question. The fare in Taipei right now, well, I could say it's about like $1 probably could get you to like within an hour range. Okay, one US dollar. $1 US. In Kaohsiung, it's also one US dollar. And in Taipei, well, my impression from interviewing people is that they think it's affordable. It's of course riding motorcycles is cheaper, but it's affordable, and they would rather do that. And in Kaohsiung, many people say it's too expensive. And I think there are two things, right? Kaohsiung is the industrial city. Taipei continues to be the financial center of Taiwan. So the living standards probably is different in two cities, one thing. But then I think there is also this perspective in terms of what is expensive, what is cheap. And that part I haven't figured that out. Like, you know, could be they can afford, but it's just too expensive. We don't want to do it. Yes.
Yes, in the future, high-speed rail and subway transportations are going to be a major ticket item being built around the world in many different cities. How much of this subway system was possibly built with the mind frame that this is a design system for Taiwanese company, as an example, to at some point in time export their technology, to make it available to other people in the world so that they can, in a sense, a long run, promote their companies, promote employment at home with the technology that they're exporting?
Yeah. I understand the question, and I'm also interested in that, and I probably cannot fully answer it, because, Taipei MRT was built with, that was the first one, so Taiwanese engineers had no experience, so that was primarily built with the help of I think it's so multi-companies. Taiwan basically used that as a diplomatic big kind of pie at that time. So actually it's a hodgepodge of technology of American, British, I don't think Japanese is in there, French, French of course, Matra, French, and cars from German, it's Siemens. So it's hodgepodge of everything. But you are seeing is that Kaohsiung MRT then actually used a lot of personnel trained in Taipei to help them to build it, but nonetheless, there is still a lot of technology coming from outside, although Taiwanese engineers understand more. Whether they are exporting it, I don't know. But I don't know. That is a good question. But I guess what I can say is that it's sort of a similar case of high-speed rail, because Taiwan has a high-speed rail, right? People also love it. It was also a technology of hodgepodge of many things, like European and the Shinkansen together. But I think the company built Taiwan Gaotie, Taiwan THSR actually, I think, has already exported that technology to, I think, some parts of Middle East. That's what I heard. And I think that's eventually what they want to do. But whether in reality they can do it, I'm not sure. I don't think a lot of things are not just engineering kind of geared, right? It's sort of political and other things are part of it. Yeah.
Time for one more question?
Yes, please.
You alluded to, but didn't talk very much about the politics of this. I'm thinking particularly of the Kaohsiung rail system. I mean, do you have any information about the debates that took place in the city council or anything like that to sort of talk about those issues, you know, whether this makes sense, whether this is a sort of display of our modernity or anything like that?
There's tons of it. And everybody, including the government knows that Kaohsiung MRT is going to it's imbalance, right? They're going to cost a lot of money, and they're not going to make the money. They know that. They still know. They knew that. They still know that. What interesting thing is that when Taipei MRT was conceived in many MRT systems in Taiwanese cities were conceived in 1980s, and so at that time, if I may go into this real sort of muddy, nitty-gritty situation, political situation, when Kaohsiung was ruled by Kuomintang and the mayor was appointed, and the mayor didn't want to build it. And neither the city council wanted to spend the money to build it, because the Taipei city is much more wealthy than Kaohsiung city. And the central government paid 50% of the construction cost for Taipei, and that was when Taiwan's financial situation was pretty good. And so 20 years later, Taiwan is going bankruptcy, basically. Well, not really, but Taiwanese government didn't have that much money. And so I think more than 50% was sort of a, well, initially, kind of the Kaohsiung City Council thought that, well, why should we pay more percentage than Taipei city government paid? And obviously, this is not going to work. So City Council was not happy about it, and the mayor was not pushing for it. So it got stalled for 10 years. And when it happened when the DPP took over the central government and took over the Kaohsiung city. So you sort of see political aspect really played into it. Yeah. So that kind of. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we will now continue forward with our next presentation, and then we'll actually have a break. Our next presenter is Hong-Mei Lee from Georgia State University, and her presentation is Out-of-Home Advertising in China, Contested Space for Control, Power, and Identity.
My talk today discusses how Chinese out-of-home advertising functions as a contested space for control, power, and cultural identity. And I use the term out-of-home advertising instead of outdoor advertising because a lot of out-of-home advertising forms are actually indoor advertising, such as flat TV screens, screens in lifts of residential or office buildings, boards and panels at an airport, and so on. That's the term out-of-home advertising can better describe the current state of the advertising landscape in China. But I still think it's, we can still use the term to describe China's outdoor mediascape in the 1980s and 1990s, but I use this term for convenience. Instead of following the fashion of the US media workers, Chinese ad professionals have discussed the recent transformation from outdoor advertising to out-of-home advertising, which is called 在途中 advertising in China. I will look at out-of-home advertising as an institution and as a space. And as an institution, advertising can be examined in terms of its development, ownership, advertising, regulation, and industry structure. And as a space, it can be examined in terms of how it transformed and is transforming China's urban and physical symbolic space that privileges particular groups of people and materialize a particular kind of space arrangement and celebrates some particular kind of values. Why study out-of-home space advertising space? In the past 3 decades, there have been dramatic transformation of urban space in China. While idealized space in pre-reform China were Spartan and productive places with full employment, secure jobs with a range of fringe benefits, minimal income and lifestyle differences, an end to conspicuous consumption and lavish spending, and with decent consumption standards for all. Chinese cities in the reform era have become extravagant places for consumer goods and services from all over the world. They are featured with towering buildings, gigantic billboards, beautiful models, neon lighting, endless streams of automobiles and people, variety of stores, and so on. So there has also been an exponential development of Chinese cities. While China had only 300 million urban residents in 1990, but the number reached 600 million, and rapid growth occurred only in the last 10 years, and the city is expected to continue to grow at a high rate in the next decade. Out-of-home advertising has become an inherent part of the city landscape. Various kinds of street street furniture at strategic places have been set up for advertising purposes. And so in this space, visual context with advertising is unavoidable and inescapable. As Chinese cities become more modern, and out-of-home advertising has also evolved from being associated with crude billboards, panels, and poster technology-oriented products, such as digital platforms, mobile media, and so on. And so this slide shows the transformation of the Nanjing Road in Shanghai, which has shifted from a productive compound that was in line with the socialist aesthetics in the 1960s to the busiest commercial street in Shanghai. And this district is often called Shanghai's #1 commercial district. Okay. And how can we understand out-of-home advertising as a public space? And I just and in my paper, I included many more theories here, but I just want to mention 3 theories here. Henry Lefebvre discussed how using urban space in capitalist societies torn between satisfying social purpose and commercial purpose, and thus he coined the term the right to the city. And David Harvey examined how there is conflict in using urban space for what is good for people and what is good for calculation, and using ethnographic data about outdoor advertising in London. And Crowley argues that out-of-home advertising space can be seen as calculative space, which is a nexus of people in space, commercial imperatives, and a calculated energy or orientation to calculation. And the space and people are constantly classified and studied to make the space governable. Marketing data and classification are thus used to produce a particular kind of social order. Such space as a container of flexible resources for visual context is thus always open for manipulation and remolding. And viewing out-of-home advertising in China as both an institution and a space can yield important insights into transformation of the industry and the complexity of such a transformation and the implications. So here, advertising, out-of-home advertising in China has to be understood in the context of China's search for modernity. In the past century, the concept of modernity has been embraced officially and is also enthusiastically covered in popular literature. Modernity, which is often understood as a process of social and historical transformation in the West, has motivated China to pursue dramatic social changes, as well as limit China's ideas about what is possible. Chinese modernity has been inherently associated with global influences, ranging from China's semi-colonial history to its current participation in global economy. On the one hand, many Chinese modernists believe that China should emulate the Western development model, but on the other hand, China's historical suffering at the hands of Western powers have made many Chinese suspicious towards the Western powers. And so consequently, nationalism and transnationalism can both be found in China's imagined relationship with the West. Discourses about advertising as an institution among advertising professionals and the specific values that are sold in Chinese ads reflect such a tension between nationalism and cosmopolitanism. And China has also seen a rise in middle class with the emergence of consumer culture. Pleasure in and pursuit for consumption has become a dominant value among Chinese youth, and among the youth. Actually, probably in the past decade, we see this the rise of nationalism. Since 1990s, actually, we see the rise of nationalism among the Chinese youth, and in 2008, and the sentiment of nationalism actually has arrived at a very high point there. And so now let us have a brief look at the development of Chinese advertising. As you can see from this chart, advertising exploded after 1992 when the Chinese government fully immersed itself in economic development. With double-digit and occasionally triple-digit growth rate, China's total advertising expenditure reached 190 billion yuan in 2008, which represents an increase of 10,000 times from 1979, when Chinese advertising was only approximately 10 million yuan, while in 1981, China had approximately 1,000 advertising operation units, including advertising agencies as well as media organizations like newspapers, magazines, and TV stations that were licensed to carry advertising. The number, however, reached more than 170,000 in 2007, and the number of advertising workers increased from 16,000 to more than 1 million between 1981 to 2007. And the data about out-of-home advertising in China started to be collected separately since 1999. Before that, the data actually was emerged with some other advertising sectors, and it has grown very rapidly since then. In 2007, out-of-home advertising reached 18 million yuan, and it became the third largest advertising sector in China, next to TV and newspaper advertising. And more than 87,000 companies, which is half of the number of all media and advertising firms in China, were licensed to conduct out-of-home advertising business. And they operated more than 3 million outdoor media, including roadside billboards, neon-lit panels, and so on. And the majority of operators are very small, and with each managing 30 media on average. And so the market is very fragmented, and anyone with 100,000 yuan, 100,000 yuan of registered capital can set up a company. And as one of the least regulated and monitored advertising sectors, out-of-home advertising is very competitive. And also Chinese advertising is very much geographically concentrated. Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou have always taken up over half of the advertising spending in China. And there is a huge gap between cities along East Coast and rural and cities in inland areas. And as a symbolic space, out-of-home advertising historically represented a signal of Beijing's determination for its open-door policy of economic reforms. And in 1979, advertising began to appear on the Xidan democracy wall. And in the same year, this influential ad also appeared in Beijing, which began to associate a beautiful woman with a skin product. And using women in advertising them took momentum. And since the 1990s, we have seen a lot of ads that feature celebrities. And Billboard was one of the most frequent used media in China then. Many well-known Japanese and American products were advertised on billboards. This slide shows an ad of Sony placed in Beijing in 1984, and a Chinese product, Lucky Cola, in Shanghai in 1984. I guess this ad, and even the name, actually, Lucky Cola, I think is really associated with Coca-Cola. And many foreign corporations engage in image advertising and market their products years before they were available in the Chinese market. And Japanese advertising was especially prominent in China then. In strategic areas in Beijing, such as Xidan, Liubukou, Wangfujing, and Dongdan, billboards of Sanyang, Ricoh, and Sony were erected respectively, and a gigantic billboard for Toyota was also erected near the Beijing airport, and its slogan, 车到山前必有路，有路必有丰田车, which really means that there will be a road at the foot of a mountain, and there will be Toyota whenever there is a road. So this slogan enjoyed great popularity in China, and Toyota still uses this slogan in China from time to time. And throughout the 1980s, most foreign ads were placed through a few state-owned Chinese ad agencies, including Beijing Advertising Corporation, Shanghai Advertising Corporation, and Guangdong Advertising Corporation. And such ads were called coming to China ads, or 来华广告. Foreign producers created and produced their ads in foreign countries because they were dissatisfied with the creativity and production in China. And Chinese ad agencies simply provided advice about the appropriation of the content, Chinese translation, media placement plans, and sometimes implemented market research in China. And in the 1980s, we saw an uneasy relationship between advertising and socialism in China. And foreign advertising was often directly linked to capitalist decadence and economic invasions. Due to decades of attacks on capitalism and imperialism and a constant fear in China that the capitalist class might be restored, the promise of Japanese advertising made it an easy target of Chinese nationalism. For example, in 1980, Beijing Advertising Corporation set up a window display for Panasonic products, including a washing machine, stereo sound equipment, and TV set at Wangfujing department store, and one of the most well-known department stores in Beijing. And the display meant to represent a corner of a typical middle-class family. Beijing residents showed a great interest in the display, and many surrounded the window to view it. There was a great controversy over the display, however. Chen Chun, former general manager of Beijing Advertising Corporation, recalled there were people who said, where are you going to direct the Chinese youth? What do you advertise is the lifestyle of capitalist society? And some post a small character poster calling the ad workers national traitors. And People's Daily, the Communist Party organ, also strongly criticized the window play, and this incident was reported to the Beijing municipal government, which reissued a circular ruling that advertising agencies should not sign any new contract for window play for foreign products in the future. And there were also complaints that the Chang'an Avenue, which cuts through the heart of Beijing, had turned into a Japanese boulevard. And in 1985, the Beijing municipal government issued a notice that limited the placement of out-of-home advertising along the Chang'an Avenue, the Beijing railway station, and the Beijing airport in response to complaints against foreign advertising. And when the Beijing municipal government cleaned up the outdoor advertising environment next year, the Sony billboards was pulled down, and 80% of advertising of billboards erected by Beijing Advertising Art Company were demolished. In the same year, two gigantic Toshiba billboards were set up on top of the Shanghai International Hotel, the highest building in Shanghai. The Toshiba billboards caused great concern in China. People thought that it was inappropriate to place Japanese ads on the landmark building of Shanghai. And the former deputy general manager of Shanghai Advertising Corporation recalled an interview, and he said that after the placement of billboards, college students angrily expressed their complaints, and older comrades expressed their reservation, and some threatened to rush to the roof and bomb the billboards. They said, in the past, Japan invaded China through military means, and now it is the economic invasion. And so, responding to the strong reactions, the Shanghai municipal government ordered the Chinese ad agency to place a billboard of Chinese products to compromise the effects. And they worked really hard to find a Chinese company that was willing to place a billboard there. That's and so these examples indicate that in the 1980s, educated Chinese were very sensitive to China's contradiction, to China's own cultural uniqueness from capitalism, and thus people were confused about the internal contradictions between economic policy and socialist state ideology. And foreign advertising was a quintessential embodiment of such contradictions. Even ad workers did not want to acknowledge that advertising was part of the capitalist culture. For example, one senior ad professional stated in my interview in 2005, and we were very cautious to place capitalism. We would report any capitalistic dissemination to authorities for directions. So responses to Japanese ads were complicated, in particular because of the Japanese invasions in China before and during World War II, and the imperialism argument that compared Japan's economic invasion to military invasion was limited then, though. But this argument has got a momentum since the 1990s. And a few years ago, two ads for Toyota and one ad for Nippon Paint caused a lot of nationalistic expressions in Chinese media. And in 2005's anti-Japanese demonstrations and the current anti-Japan demonstrations in China, there were always calls for boycotting Japanese products. And what is ironic is that the bund in Shanghai now is loaded with Japanese neon signs and ads. And so after Deng Xiaoping's talk in 1992 that called Chinese people to be bolder in pursuing economic reforms, Chinese advertising experienced an explosion growth, and a lot of small outdoor advertising companies were set up with an average growth of 5,000. During this period of time, new forms of outdoor advertising were developed, such as advertising on the body of a satellite, on TV tower, and so on. And outdoor advertising constantly tested the social, cultural, and legal boundaries. For example, in 2002, Kent Tobacco signed a contract with Hubei Guishan TV Tower, the highest TV tower in Asia then, to put its ad on the body of the tower with the word Kent painted on the tower and the shape of the tower looking like a huge cigarette. The ad was very influential, which caused huge media discussions whether it was appropriate for TV tower to advertise for tobacco products. And a high-level official at the Ministry of Health even threatened to withdraw Wuhan's qualification as a national hygiene city. Under the pressure of the government and society, the TV tower ended the contract 11 months before its expiration, even though the ad was not against any law or regulations then. The controversy certainly helped to establish in the advertising law that was passed in 1994 that forbade all types of tobacco ads in public space. And in the 1990s, the Chinese advertising industry witnessed many records of the biggest, the highest, and the longest. For example, in 1997, Kodak placed the largest ever neon light billboard atop the Beijing Postal Service Management Bureau along the Chang'an Avenue, which was 209 meters long, around 8 meters high, totaling around 1,600 square meters. And it used 40,000 neon light tubes, which attract huge media attention. And this colossal board was dismounted together with more than 300 other ads in 1999, when China was in preparation for its 50th year anniversary. The Tiananmen Square, the Chang'an Avenue, and a few other places were later turned into ad-free zones a few years later, after Beijing passed the regulations for out-of-home advertising. And in 1999, during the Spring Festival, Coca-Cola also set up the largest outdoor ad in Shanghai, at the Shanghai People's Square, which was around 9,000 square meters. And this ad was reported to enter the Guinness record of Chinese advertising. And so this outdoor advertising was, well, very influential, were often single ads that aimed to attract attention, and they were rarely part of larger media or marketing campaigns then. Since the turn of the century, outdoor advertising has been integrated with overall marketing plan for products. Okay, so this is, so since the turn of the 21st century, out-of-home advertising in China, however, has become more sophisticated in terms of its technologies, creativity, capital operation, daily management. And Chinese and foreign venture capital entered the Chinese market, and large outdoor media groups have been formed. Foreign capital now controls some of the most influential outdoor media firms in China through mergers and acquisitions. And one common strategy for outdoor media groups to compete with others was to be listed in Hong Kong or in New York. The out-of-home media have become tools through which global capitalists, local elites, and government bureaucrats execute, control, and generate profits. And so, and I gave you a handout. I don't know how many of you have that handout. So, so they hand out these mergers and acquisition information of 7 leading outdoor advertising groups in China. And two companies are foreign origin. Tom Outdoor Media Group, controlled by Hong Kong tycoon Li Jiacheng, was registered in Cayman Islands in 1999 and was listed in the Hong Kong stock market in 2000. And GSA was the largest outdoor advertising company in Europe and the second largest company in the world. And it entered China in 2005 after purchasing several Chinese firms. And Clear Media China is a joint venture established in 2005 between the White Horse advertising company and Clear Channel, and the largest outdoor media corporation in the world. And 4 companies, including Focus Media, Dahe International Media Group, Air Media, and Vision Media China of Chinese origin. As you can see, the expansion occurred in the last 10 years, and all companies were engaged in purchases, mergers, and acquisitions. And indeed, the expansion of TAM in 2002 was a wake-up call for Chinese companies. And since then, trade journals of advertising have constantly used the term 资本运作, which can be translated as capital operation or management, to describe the importance of capital management in the Chinese advertising industry. And He Chaobin, founder of Dahe, who is now deputy director of the Chinese Advertising Association, has repeatedly talked about the importance of 资本运作 in various occasions. As you can also see from this table, and Chinese firms first choose to be listed in Hong Kong, but later choose to be listed on Nasdaq stock market, largely because of the symbolic meaning that associated with going public in New York. Since the US in specific and the West in general are always associated in China with modernity and technological advancement, going public in New York can function as a competitive tool for Chinese companies in the Chinese market. For example, Sina actually set up a special forum for Vision Media China and interviewed its CEO and talked about various aspects that were related to being listed in Hong Kong. Money gained from the stock market also enabled the rapid expansion of these media corporations, that's creating higher thresholds for newcomers. And there has been an increasing attention toward out-of-home advertising in China, and a few outdoor media has rising rapidly in the overall ranking of Chinese advertising corporations. While no out-of-home advertising company was listed among the top media advertising operators in 1999, but Dahe was ranked number 21 in 2000, and in 2004, the revenue of TAM ranked number 10 among all advertising operators. And in 2008, 7 out-of-home advertising companies actually were listed among the top 10 advertising firms in China based on their advertising revenue. And so you can see that the out-of-home advertising is becoming more and more important. There is also a convergence between traditional media players and new media players in China. For example, CCTV and Buzz Online formed CCTV mobile media to specialize on content customized for buses and subway trains in over 30 Chinese cities. And Sina, the largest Chinese internet portal, announced in 2008 to acquire outdoor business and in-store advertising of Focus Media. Even though Sina later pulled out of the deal for various reasons, the fact that it planned to do so indicated an inherent interest in forming same media or cross-media groups. The strong attempt to become strong, and the strong have attempted to become stronger, and small companies run the risk of being squeezed out of the market. And in a sense, Chinese outdoor media have developed far beyond their ideological constraints and become money machines in China's neoliberal market. And very recently, out-of-home advertising has been often associated with out-of-home advertising has always been associated with urban chaos and filth. And very recently, Chinese local governments have launched various campaigns to clean up out-of-home media. While such campaigns in the 1980s and 1990s were often isolated cases, the campaigns since the turn of the century have become more systematic. leading not only to the dismantling of outdoor boards, panels, or posts, but also to the standardization of the outdoor media environment, the confiscation of media space, and direct involvement of local government in media, in advertising business. And one challenge for outdoor media companies is that local governments are often not consistent in implementing regulations and the laws. And throughout the 1980s, and out-of-home advertising experienced the least regulation, and even after the passing of the advertising law in 1994, and many billboards were still set up for illegally. And however, at that time, many officials did not really care and they ignore the billboards. But when newly appointed officials took office, and they often dismantled these billboards to prove their work performance. And so special events such as Beijing Olympics, the Shanghai Expo, and the Shanghai Games in Guangzhou always involved cleaning up of outdoor media and dismantling of street advertising furniture. And so contrary to the perception that big events can drive out-of-home advertising spending, during the Beijing Olympics and the Shanghai Expo, out-of-home advertising in the whole city actually declined. And cities also use special events to establish new laws for outdoor advertising, and sometimes confiscate media space for auction. And so, for example, in 2004, Beijing issued regulations governing outdoor advertising, attempted to standardize the backlit panels, neon-lit billboards, digital billboards, and so on, in order to prepare for Beijing's running toward the Olympics. And the Beijing municipal government also auctioned its outdoor media space and obtained about more than 100 million yuan by 2007. And since 2003, Shanghai also engaged in similar cleaning campaign and required all roadside media to be converted into neon light ad boards, despite the fact that many out-of-home media were invited by the government to be placed in the first place, because the local governments at first launched various campaigns like Let the City Shine, and so they wanted investment from out-of-home media investors, and later, when new officials took office, or when there were new events, and they feel, the outdoor billboards do not really look good in the city, and so they would dismantle these billboards and then confiscate the media space and then sell it to the highest bidders, and which really privileges media corporations that were backed by international investors. And indeed, all these media campaigns corresponded with the rapid formation of media groups in China. And also, we also witnessed in the last few years that media prices have dramatically risen. In 2003, prices for large billboards increased on average over 15% in Beijing, and over 20% in Shanghai, and over 25 to 30% in Guangzhou, and over 30% in Chengdu. And when and after local governments auctioned the media space, and normally they would retain a certain percentage of revenue for its own use, and Guangzhou was reported to retain like 40%. For the government use, and so there was also this kind of confusion towards who owned the rights to the public space. Theoretically, all public space in China is owned by the government, but in the last few decades, we see this kind of privatization of public space because of the rapid growth of the real estate market. And so now there is still confusion about who shall have the right to sell the public, who shall have the right toward public space. And so there are variety of governmental agencies that are in competition with each other in claiming the public space. And traditionally, when there is public space, the building owners can the building owners negotiate with advertisers, with the media groups in order, in terms of the contract items. But now it is the government that set up the auction, and in order to standardize the look of the urban space. And another challenge is that there are several government agencies governing out-of-home media, including city appearance departments, city governments, the administration of industry and commerce, and the lighting office. And each department has different regulations, and sometimes their regulation can be contradictory, and thus media operators and advertisers cannot tell explicitly what is allowed and what is not allowed. And when we discuss out-of-home advertising in China, we have to constantly remind ourselves that a large part of China is excluded from this picture. The advertising scape in rural area is quite different from that of the city. The advertising scape in rural areas, as you can see from this slide, such crude ads are often found on residential walls in rural places, and the billboards often just mention names of the products without a fancy overall advertising strategy. And Sun Liping, a well-cited scholar and professor at Tsinghua University, argues that increasing inequalities have produced a fractured Chinese society. And Hu Angang, another prominent Chinese scholar, contends that there exist 4 worlds in China based on the gross domestic product per capita. And the images on this side show the sharp contrast between village in Sichuan and Beijing. And again, these images show that our discussion about out-of-home advertising is just about urban China. Rural China is in a different world. And to conclude, out-of-home advertising contributes to the production of space and the reinforcement of class relations. It has become a contested space for control, power, and cultural identity. The local government's participation into media auctions and business conduct privileges large media groups backed by transnational capital. While in the 1980s, this space was about its incompatibility with socialism. Now it's more about whether it is in line with China's image as a modern city. As a calculated space, it favors consumers with purchasing power and excludes those who do not have consumption power. And out-of-home advertising thus reinforces and materializes class distinctions in China. And the development of out-of-home has evolved together with the grander socialist ethics in China. Thank you very much.
Time for a few questions from the audience.
I have a question. On your handout sheet, where these companies are joint ventures with investors, Chinese investors, international investors, but also share a percentage with the Chinese government, correct?
I don't think they share percentage with the Chinese government.
So, in the controlling what goes out there as outdoor advertising, the Chinese government has to approve each and every ad, billboard. There's like a committee that reviews everything and said, yes, it can go up, and no, it cannot go up?
It's like, because now, in the past, yes, they, when they signed a contract with work unit, and then they had to go through the approval process in order to set up the billboard panels, posts, and so on. But now it's the Chinese government actually auctioned the space. And so, so the Chinese government rewarded the space to the highest bidders. And so in terms of content, actually, the Chinese out-of-home advertising is the least regulated because it is treated merely as a commercial space rather than this kind of propaganda space. But at the same time, all this, the companies, the Chinese companies the big companies that were involved in out-of-home advertising actually have very close relationship with the government. And for example, He Chaobing, even though he was not government official, but then he later became the deputy director of the Chinese Advertising Association. And so the Chinese government can incorporate those successful entrepreneurs and into the mainstream or into the official agenda. And so they are not so interested in really challenge the state ideology. And so their main purpose now is really about the capital management and operation. And so what they really care most of the time is really about how to make themselves big and to achieve this kind of economy of scale, and so that they can compete with international firms. And so, and in terms of content, they do not really need to be approved every time. But at the same time, there are advertising agencies in China like Gongxiangju, and they have to regulate about what is put there and what is not. Yeah. Yes.
I know there has to be a lot of criteria going into this question that I wanted to ask. But it is the response of the consumer to outdoor advertising, bus advertising versus television versus newspaper, et cetera, something that they can bring into their home. Do they find it similar to what you find in other countries of the world, or are the Chinese companies spending more proportionate because of the density on outdoor advertising? I'm just curious where all that fits in as to the consumer's response.
Right now, out-of-home advertising in China is becoming more and more important, as you can see from the rising revenue of these advertising corporations in last decade. And of course, TV advertising is still the most important in China, and it has the biggest chunk of advertising money. And in contrast with the situation in the U.S., and the TV advertising money actually is in decline. And in terms of this kind of comparison, and I do think that the Chinese out-of-home advertising looks much more modern and looks much more sleek in terms of the design, especially this kind of high scale places like the airport, the railway, underground railway stations, and so on. And I have not yet done any kind of comparison between the Chinese outdoor advertising and outdoor advertising in other countries, but I will look at that, and see how it can fit together. But my guess is that probably out-of-home advertising is much more important in other countries because of the density of the population. But again, for out-of-home advertising corporations, and they definitely treat the spaces as fragmented spaces, and they only talk about how many billboards they have and how much advertising space that they have occupied, and they use the term 跑马圈地, like to run your horse to enclose space, and which can be figuratively translated as to strategic slashing of public space. And so the slash of public space is becoming more important than other things. So they really treat that urban space as a space that can be used for strategic accumulation. Yes.
Recently, Chinese leaders, some of them have been speaking out against censorship. What incentives are changing so that there's changes or lack of or increase of censorship in China? I'm thinking also of Ralph Nader complaining in the U.S. that the public media airwaves, and Michael Moore too, should be totally free, period. And in particular for them, in terms of political candidates for president, there should be no barriers. Corporations should not be able to buy ads, which gives a disincentive to the populace having anyone run for any office without being channeled through two major controlling parties. That's censorship by money and power. China has its own form, but how are these incentives changing either through advertising, through consumer attitudes, or philosophical enlightenment, I'll call it.
Yeah, that's a very very interesting question, and a lot of advertising professionals I've talked with actually said that China is the most advertising friendly country in the world, and in the 1980s, actually a lot of people choose to watch ads rather than the TV programs because they feel, oh, the ads were so interesting, and then so. And so even now, I don't see this kind of resistance among Chinese consumers, and so I think there's always this kind of paradox in Chinese cultural scape if we really look at it. So on the one hand, advertising or anything that is related to this kind of consumer culture can be viewed as liberating, as something that can challenge the communist orthodox ideology. But on the other hand, we also see how power and this kind of money can function as another control mechanism. But in China, I think there's more resistance toward this kind of government, communist ideology versus the resistance toward this kind of neoliberal ideology. So, and definitely there are leftist scholars. There are scholars who are on the left wing who discuss how this kind of power and controls start to control people again, and we should go back to this kind of socialist, mainstream socialist ideology. But I don't think that kind of talk is very influential among Chinese consumers. And right now, money making is still the most important things for a lot of Chinese. And so we can see how influential such kind of neoliberal ideology has become in China. So we see this kind of authoritarian state on the one hand, and we see this kind of economic liberation on the other hand. So that works in a way that means that China might get the worst of both. Yeah. Okay, yes?
One more question?
Oh.
It's possible that this is not a place where your research took you, but I wondered if you happen to know whether Japanese goods are selling well. You talked about the unpleasant feeling that some people had, with the reemergence of Japanese advertising.
Actually, Japanese products still sell very well in China. And Japanese products are still associated with this kind of higher social status, and also they are associated with higher quality. And people still purchase Sony products, still purchase their electronics, the cars, and so on. And so, and what is ironic is that in 2005, and we see large-scale demonstrations against against Japan and Japanese government, but at the same time, people smash some Japanese cars, but at the same time they use the Japanese camera, okay, and the camera of Japanese brand to take photos, and so you see this kind of paradox among Chinese consumers, and so I think that this kind of nationalistic feeling, even though nationalistic feelings are always associated with a particular kind of events, are always responsive or reactive in Chinese society, but at the same time they can always be triggered at some point when new things happen. And so on the one, so that's why we cannot really ignore such kind of nationalism, but at the same time we cannot really overemphasize this kind of direct causal relationship between consumer nationalism and the sales volumes of Japanese products. And I talked with a lot of Chinese while I was in China collecting data for my dissertation. And then so I don't like Japanese products, but they still, and they tried to persuade other people not to buy Japanese products. But from time to time, they still purchase Japanese products, and for various reasons. And one reason is that they consider Japanese products are of better quality. So, so there, and also there is a safety reason. And if we look at the milk scandal in China, and so now a lot of Chinese consumers actually only purchase imported products from the U.S. and from other countries, Western countries. And so in a way, it speaks about this kind of contradictory feelings and attitudes and paradox in Chinese attitude toward foreign advertising.
Thank you very much. Very informative. We now had to take a quick tea or coffee break, and we'll start again probably at 5 past. Give us a little bit of time to take a look. Hey, Tanya. Okay, they've already got it. Okay, good. Oh, good. How you doing? You getting back to do some time? You never did want to roll. It's nice. It might just get out and go.